So thank you, Paul. There's so much that can be done with waste. Could you also tell us about things like other cascading systems that use perennial peanuts or the use of bones or even feathers to help produce food and other value-added biomaterials locally?
Well, there was a lady named Mihan who, she now lives in Ben Zoom here in Vietnam. And she came and she introduced the perennial peanut to Vietnam. It didn't exist before she came. And now you see it in every city. The cities love it because it knocks out the grass. And so you have this beautiful green carpet with yellow flowers of perennial peanut. But the perennial peanut is more than just a decorative plant. The crude protein goes up to 32%. Humans don't eat it. But just about everything else does. And so one of the things I strongly advise farmers to do, don't just plant coffee, one crop, intercrop. Have several crops. If something goes bad with the coffee price, well, at least you have something else. So you can intercrop your coffee with perennial peanut. And when there is, and the perennial peanut does very well in shaded area. It only requires about 25% sunlight. You don't want full sunlight. If so, it doesn't grow very tall. But if you block out a good portion of the sun, it starts growing, and sometimes it gets up to 60 centimeters in height. So it's very, very easy to cut and carry. Then, of course, you can feed it as is to a cow or to a pig, but the best is, of course, is to ferment. And a lot of unavailable protein in it becomes available. And, of course, it's not just perennial peanut. There are many other things that can be intercropped. But I really don't want to see someone just growing coffee, just growing bananas. But think of a banana plantation. That could all around the banana trees could be a solid carpet of perennial peanut. They might make more money from the perennial peanut than they would from the banana or from the coffee. Why? Because now they've got an incredible animal feed. You see. And I also want to use perennial peanut in forest management. You make a fire break in perennial peanut, a 3-meter wide fire break running through a forest. And the beautiful thing about perennial peanut, even in dry season, it's never going to turn brown. It's going to always stay a lush green. And so fire will not cross over. Now, of course, a little bit of maintenance has to be there. And intercrop. Okay, you can, instead of cutting down all the pine trees on the side of this hill, let us leave most of the pine trees there and let's intercrop it with perennial peanut or something else. And so, yes, coffee can, how would you say, coffee can be grown in a pine forest. And at first, there were several people who would tell me, no, that's not possible. And so I started looking on the internet. Well, there's a group in the Philippines that do that. It's a wonderful Arabica coffee, and it's grown in the pine forest. And I have a lot of friends who grow coffee, and I love them so much. But when I go visit their farm, I see all of the pine trees were cut down. It's so sad. And I tell them that, and they say, well, look, everybody does that. Yeah, everybody's destroying our planet, basically. You don't want to be chopping down trees anymore. You know.
It's true.
So there are so many plants that can be grown together. They can be grown on the same plot of land. And these plants can support one another. Some of them even, growing a certain plant next to one plant prevents pesticides from invading that other plant. These
are permaculture techniques.
Yes. So, you know, the permaculture community is I really admire what they're doing. The only thing I would caution them to do is make sure you transform waste at the highest level.
Mm-hmm.
The agroforestry people, they're doing enormous, beautiful work.
Mm-hmm.
But again, make sure you transform waste at the highest possible levels.
Which is why I asked you about as well, what have you been promoting in terms of the use of, for instance, bones and feathers and other wastes that are typically not thought of as being valuable?
Well, bone is a huge problem in Vietnam. They take cow bone, pig bone, chicken bone, and they boil it. And they make a bone broth. And there are several soups that are based upon this bone broth.
Mm-hmm.
There were writing stories in Hanoi where all these little shops boiling bone,
Mm-hmm.
they just take the bone and they throw it away. And you go down a road or a street, and on both sides of the streets there are big piles of bone, and it stinks.
After they make their soups.
After they make the soup, the spent bone is just discarded.
Mm-hmm.
Now, where are we going to get the phosphorus? 80% of the phosphorus in an animal is in the bone. And 80% of that bone can be converted into tricalcium phosphate, given a little bit of gasifier heat. And we cannot afford to throw phosphorus away. It's phosphorus, calcium, all of that. You can't just reject that. All of that bone has to come back. Now, look how sad it is. They're going to boil bone for 5 hours maybe.
Mm-hmm.
What do they use? They use bottle gas. They don't need to use bottle gas. They can use a gasifier. I have a gasifier with pellets, can easily